You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com.
What if I told you ExxonMobil, the oil giant, predicted global warming decades before it became a household term? Recent research claims the company's own scientists accurately forecasted how burning fossil fuels would heat the planet, and did so with unsettling precision. Let's pause for a moment. When we hear ExxonMobil, most of us picture gas stations and oil rigs, not climate science. But internal memos from the 1970s and 80s reveal advanced climate modeling. Think radiative forcing, which is just a fancy way of measuring how greenhouse gases trap heat in our atmosphere. Now you might be thinking, didn't ExxonMobil publicly cast doubt on climate change? And you'd be spot on. For years, the company funded campaigns sowing uncertainty, while their own models predicted exactly what's unfolding today. This contradiction, knowing the risks, yet promoting doubt, sets the stage for a much deeper story about power, profit, and responsibility. So, how did ExxonMobil get here? And what does its history mean for our future? Let's rewind the clock. Stick with me as we trace ExxonMobil's origins, from Rockefeller's ambition to today's climate crossroads. Let me tell you a story. John D. Rockefeller, born in 1839 in Richford, New York, wasn't destined for oil, at least not at first. Raised by a devoutly religious mother and a frequently absent, risk-taking father, young John learned discipline and self-reliance early. As a kid, he showed an uncanny knack for business raising and selling turkeys, keeping meticulous ledgers, and even lending money at interest. Those ledgers are what business historians call primary sources, the raw data of Rockefeller's rise. Now, you might wonder, what sets apart a future tycoon from an ordinary farm boy? For Rockefeller, it was his obsession with efficiency and his almost scientific attention to detail, a precursor to what we'd now call process optimization. This blend of thrift, discipline, and calculation would later become the DNA of Standard Oil, ExxonMobil's ancestor. So, was Rockefeller born a titan, or did his environment shape him? The answer, as we'll see, lies in a perfect storm of timing and temperament. Picture Cleveland, Ohio, in the mid-1800s, a city buzzing with the energy of the Industrial Revolution. Here, a teenage Rockefeller landed his first real job as a bookkeeper, his entry into the world of commerce. But in 1859, everything changed. News broke of black gold crude oil discovered in Titusville, Pennsylvania. This single event birthed the modern petroleum industry. The technical term here is upstream, meaning oil extraction, as opposed to downstream, refining and selling. Now, imagine the chaos. Wild price swings, dangerous refineries, boom towns rising and falling overnight. Where most saw risk, Rockefeller saw a system begging for order. He realized the real fortune wasn't in gambling on oil wells, but in controlling the refining and distribution, the midstream and downstream of the oil supply chain. This insight set him apart, transforming how the oil business worked and paving the way for Standard Oil's dominance. So, how did Rockefeller turn chaos into profit? He partnered with Maurice B. Clark and Samuel Andrews in Cleveland to launch a small refinery. Here's where the magic happened. Andrews knew the chemistry, think fractional distillation, which separates oil into useful parts like kerosene, while Rockefeller obsessed over cutting costs. He negotiated brutal deals for raw materials, squeezed every cent from byproducts, and meticulously tracked waste a level of granularity we'd now call lean manufacturing. Now, if you're wondering, didn't competitors do the same? Not quite. Rockefeller's relentless cost-cutting gave him a massive edge, enabling him to undercut rivals and force them out. Let me put it this way. Where others saw profit margins, Rockefeller saw a battlefield. Efficiency wasn't just a business philosophy, it was a weapon. This obsession with control down to the last barrel would soon extend far beyond Cleveland. Here's a pivotal question. What good is cheap kerosene if you can't get it to market? In the 1870s, railroads were the arteries of commerce, and oil refiners were their lifeblood. But the rail barons held all the cards. Rockefeller wasn't content to be at their mercy. He played railroads against each other, promising massive shipments in exchange for lower freight rates, a technical term for shipping costs per unit. When negotiation failed, he built his own barrel plants and fleets of tank cars. That's vertical integration, controlling every step, from refinery to shipment. Now, you might ask, didn't this make enemies? Absolutely. But it also made Rockefeller's operation nearly invincible, less reliant on outsiders, more in control of profit and quality. It's a classic case of turning logistical hurdles into strategic advantages, laying the groundwork for a national oil empire. By 1870, Rockefeller had a new vision, not just to compete, but to dominate. Enter Standard Oil and its most controversial innovation, the trust. Think of a trust as a corporate octopus, with tentacles in every part of the industry. Here's how it worked. Smaller refineries swapped their stock for trust certificates, handing control to a central board, Rockefeller's board. This legal structure let Standard Oil skirt state laws against monopolies, creating what economists call market concentration. Competitors faced a stark choice: sell out or be driven into bankruptcy by relentless price wars. The result? Standard Oil controlled over 90% of U.S. refining by the 1880s. Now you might be asking, wasn't this unfair? Many agreed. Political cartoons portrayed Rockefeller as a giant octopus strangling the economy, a symbol of unchecked corporate power. This brings us to the era of antitrust, America's first real reckoning with corporate giants. Let's fast forward to 1890. Public outrage reached a boiling point. Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, a landmark law aimed at breaking up monopolies and restoring competition. The term antitrust simply means laws that prevent one company from dominating a market. Rockefeller initially scoffed, believing the law was unenforceable, but he underestimated President Theodore Roosevelt's resolve. Roosevelt earned the nickname Trustbuster for a reason. A drawn-out courtroom battle ensued, culminating in the 1911 Supreme Court decision to dismantle Standard Oil into 34 separate companies. This was the legal concept of divestiture, forcing a company to sell off parts to restore competition. Here's the twist. Breaking up Standard Oil made Rockefeller even richer, as his shares in the new companies soared in value. This moment marked the end of an era. The age of the untouchable monopoly was over, but its legacy was just beginning. Out of Standard Oil's ashes rose a new breed of oil giants. One, Standard Oil of New Jersey, eventually became Exxon. While the breakup created more competition domestically, Exxon's ambitions turned global. The company pioneered offshore drilling, extracting oil from beneath the ocean floor, a feat of engineering that required seismic mapping and specialized rigs. Exxon also invested heavily in R&D research and development, looking for ways to refine oil more efficiently and discover new reserves, especially in the Middle East. But global expansion brought new challenges: negotiating with foreign governments, navigating volatile markets, and facing scrutiny over environmental and ethical practices. So, did Exxon learn from Standard Oil's mistakes, or just repackage old strategies for a bigger stage? The answer is complicated, and it's shaped the world's energy landscape ever since. No discussion of Exxon is complete without the Exxon Valdez oil spill. In 1989, a tanker struck a reef in Alaska, releasing 11 million gallons of crude oil, an ecological disaster of epic proportions. This event introduced many to the term ecological footprint, the impact a company or person has on the environment, environmental remediation, or efforts to clean up damage. Images of oil-soaked otters and devastated coastlines sparked public outrage and new regulations, forcing Exxon to overhaul its safety protocols. Now, you might ask, can a company truly atone for such damage? Exxon poured millions into cleanup and research, but the disaster left a permanent mark on its reputation. This tragedy pushed both the industry and the public to rethink the true costs of fossil fuel dependence. In 1999, a seismic event rocked the oil world. Exxon merged with Mobil, creating ExxonMobil, the largest publicly traded oil company on Earth. This was a mega merger, a technical term for when two corporate titans join forces to dominate a market. The new conglomerate wielded unprecedented power, its annual revenues rivaling the GDP of small countries, its market capitalization, the total value of its share soared past $500 billion. But with great power comes great scrutiny. ExxonMobil faces mounting pressure from investors, governments, and activists over its role in climate change and transition to renewables. Now you might be thinking, can a company built on oil pivot to a greener future? ExxonMobil is investing in biofuels and carbon capture, but fossil fuels remain its core business. The challenge ahead: adapt or risk obsolescence in a world racing toward decarbonization. As we come full circle, let's confront the big question. Can ExxonMobil help solve the climate crisis it once predicted? The company's political clout and lobbying efforts think regulatory capture, where industries shape the rules to their favor, remain formidable. Despite pledges to go greener, ExxonMobil continues to invest heavily in oil and gas, while funding groups that downplay climate science. This ongoing tension between profit and planet is what economists call a negative externality, costs imposed on society that aren't reflected in the company's bottom line. You might ask, is real change possible, or is this just greenwashing? The answer will shape not just ExxonMobil's legacy, but the pace of global climate action. Let's remember, the choices made in boardrooms today ripple outward, affecting weather patterns, communities, and generations to come. ExxonMobil's journey from Rockefeller's ledgers to climate crossroads is a powerful lesson in ambition, innovation, and accountability. The next chapter is being written right now, and we all have a stake in how it unfolds.